Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to share with you 5 things that shocked me about Eastern Europe, living in Eastern Europe. So to give some context, I have lived on, part-time, I guess, part to full-time for the last about 4 years in Eastern Europe. I've been around a bunch of other places as well, but a lot of time spent in Eastern Europe. And coming from a different part of the world and having lived in some other parts of the world as well, there was a few things that stood out to me as being kind of shocking if you're not prepared. So I'm going to cover those 5 things that stood out that I can think of immediately. If you guys have some, I'd love to hear from you. In fact, we can compare notes, put them in the comments below. What are things that shocked you about Eastern Europe? Could be good, could be bad, could be indifferent, but you were surprised by having that experience. Okay. Before we do that though, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, nail the notification bell, hit the little all notifications. I really appreciate your support. If you would like help with the subjects that we deal with here in this channel, which is international tax optimization, asset protection, forming companies, opening bank accounts, getting the right residencies, the citizenships, figuring out the best strategy for you personally and for your business, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. All right, let's dive in. So I think the first thing that I found kind of shocking was the buildings. And of course, this is not all the buildings, but the experience was in a lot of the places that I'd lived, especially in Canada, the US, if you go into, say, an apartment building, the common spaces are kind of, they're what I would call more well kept. I found, I remember one of the early experiences was in Bucharest. I was staying at this Airbnb that I'd booked, and I'd looked online and the unit looked quite nice and things like this, and I showed up and it was like an industrial building, right? It was just basically no attention to the common area really at all. I felt it was kind of almost like scary, things were kind of broken, didn't work, etc. And this is actually really common in Eastern Europe. Having a nice common space, having well cared for central areas is not the norm, quite the opposite. And so that to me was quite shocking. I was like, wow, this is different. The second thing that went along with that was the taxis. So I guess this one shouldn't be that surprising, but just identifying, okay, there's lots of scams. All right, I guess I could kind of expect that. But getting into some of these taxis, it was like they were very run down and kind of like small. So that was a different experience. Not really a big deal. Certainly, I mean, they're super cheap. It's a great deal to go with taxis. I've told people, in fact, I was telling a client today who I was talking to, the most expensive trip that somebody would do by taxi, say in Sofia, is typically from the airport to downtown, which is like €6. So normally 2 to 3 euros to go most places. Amazingly good deal. But yeah, if you get into the vehicles can have, they can be quite a spectrum, and some of them are pretty rough. Third thing, I think this one was more significant for me coming from, a warmer Western culture, is very cold exterior culture. And I was reflecting about it, kind of thinking about this video, and I don't think there is any part of the world that I've been where the exterior culture is as cold as Eastern Europe. If you're in the Middle East, I haven't experienced that. If I'm in Latin America, I haven't experienced that. If I'm in Asia, I haven't experienced that. If I'm in Western Europe or Southern Europe, I haven't experienced that. There's quite a cold, what some people would describe as rude situation. Again, I remember being in Bucharest and wondering, like, at a restaurant, like, do they want my money? It's just like I'm being ignored. It's just like, they act as though I'm doing them, or they're doing me a huge favor to bring me the menu. And I'm like, isn't the whole point here to come and order food? So yeah, this sort of thing, once you get to know people in these countries, can be very warm, very wonderful, etc. And of course, there are some who are wonderful, right? But just in general, very cold exterior culture. This was pretty shocking to me when I first encountered it. You kind of normalize to it, but then you come to some other place and you're like, oh yeah, right, this is what it's like to have people be really jovial and warm and open with you right off the bat. So that would be the third thing. The fourth thing, I think, is a lack of consumer protections. So I'm used to being in a place where you can return everything, and literally to the point where it's ridiculous, right? For example, you'll see the exposés of somebody going and buying a cake at Costco, eating part of it, returning it, and when they ask why, they say it was too big. Like just unbelievable. People were, they go and they take things, they use them for a weekend camping trip, and then they return them. Like really kind of abusive, right? Really not actually a good thing, but just amazing how far that goes. And then, you've got consumer protection laws that often if something was sold, by law, you have 11 or 14 days to return it and things like this. Not in Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, I remember a situation from Belgrade, Serbia, where somebody had bought a thing of clothing that turned out to be damaged. And literally, like, they buy it, leave the store, see, oh, go back in, and oh, sorry, can't do anything for you. That's it. I've seen cases where somebody has a piece of clothing that it's like, you just finished paying for it, you haven't even left the store, and you identify like it's dirty or something like that, nothing, right? Complaining to their head office or whatever gets you nowhere, like just incredibly bad consumer protection. So it's very buyer beware, you better, which by the way, plays into the idea that there's a lack of e-commerce, right? There's a lot of cash on delivery business there. If you want to sell into that market, selling for online credit card payments, people don't trust it the same way because of this sort of thing. So that's the next one. The fifth is probably surprising to people to hear and might be considered good by some people. And so I'll give kind of some contrast here, but is a lack of bribery and corruption. So people are going to be like, what? Are you crazy? I mean, there's so much corruption in Eastern Europe. For me, not nearly as much as I was expecting, right? I went in thinking it's super corrupt, everybody's bribable, all this kind of thing. And you discover actually that's not the case. For the most part, things are pretty normal like you would see in some of these other countries. And I expected a lot more of this. Maybe it goes back to, the fall of communism and how things were during that period, I don't know. But my expectations, certainly is much more robust, much more by the rules, by the book, etc., than I was expecting. So those are 5 things that I was shocked by when I first moved to Eastern Europe, and I would love to hear from you about what it is that you found interesting. This being said, it's an interesting place to go live. I was just talking to some people earlier today who, it's high on their list of places. They're like, we don't want legacy brand countries. We want to go to countries that are, more developing, have more, ironically, more freedom in a lot of different regards. And so, it's a popular place, and, there's some good reasons for that. There's some pros, there's some cons. So if you'd like help with any of those things, please reach out to me. Again, you can book a call, comedy.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, at Michael Rosmer. You can see the link. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.